She failed a test she didn't even know she was taking. And, honestly, it cost her everything. What if I told you one of the biggest celebrity relationships of the past decade came down to a single question? A question that had nothing to do with love or chemistry or any of the stuff we usually obsess over. It was written in Oklahoma dirt before she ever stepped foot there. This is a love story that looked perfect from every angle. Magazine covers, red carpet moments, the kind of viral content that made people believe in fairy tales again. But behind those headlines, something else was happening. Something quieter that people don't really talk about publicly. The ranch test. You probably never heard that phrase before. But stick with me here. By the end of this, you're gonna understand exactly what it means. And why it explains pretty much everything about what really happened between them. There's one specific moment insiders point to as the beginning of the end. I'll tell you exactly what went down. But first, you gotta understand the world she was walking into. Without that context, none of this makes any sense at all. So picture this. Oklahoma. Not the musical. Not some romanticized movie version. The actual place where real people live and work every single day. Miles and miles of nothing but grass and sky and the silence that makes city people physically uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that forces you to hear your own thoughts whether you want to or not. Some people find that peaceful. Others find it absolutely unbearable. There's really no in-between with places like this. The smell hits you before you even get out of the car. Hay and diesel mixing together in the morning air. Coffee brewing at 4:30 because the land doesn't care if you feel ready. It runs on its own schedule and you either adapt to that or you struggle. That's just how it works out there. That screen door everyone in the family knows still creaks the same way it did 30 years ago. Nobody fixes it. Not because they can't afford to. Because they don't want to that. Creak is part of the place, part of the rhythm, part of what makes it feel like home to the people who grew up there. This is the land that shaped him, the dirt that raised him. The silence that brought him back to center when everything else in his life got too loud. And this is exactly where she was about to be tested without anyone telling her the exam had already started. The first time she stepped onto that property, the dirt didn't care who she was. No cameras following her around. No production team fixing the lighting. No screaming fans or security details or any of that noise that normally filled her daily life. Just wind pushing through tall grass, the distant sound of cattle somewhere out there, and space. So much space it almost felt aggressive if you weren't used to it. People who were there that first day, people close to the family who never spoke about this publicly, they remember one thing more than anything else. She looked lost. Not like she didn't know where she was standing, that's not what I mean here. Lost. Like she didn't know who to be in that moment. Like every tool she'd developed over years in the spotlight suddenly had no traction on that dirt road. Like the confidence that carried her through sold-out arenas just didn't work out there. Here's what you really need to understand about places like this. Not just hear the words and nod along. Actually get it deep down. A ranch isn't a backdrop for cute photos. It's not some quirky location for a music video. It's not something you visit when you feel like playing country for a weekend. It's a code. Never written down anywhere, never posted on any gate, never explained to outsiders in clear terms, but everyone who grew up in that world knows it by heart. They absorbed it through years of early mornings and calloused hands and learning the hard way that the land doesn't care about your excuses. You wake up before the sun, not because someone makes you, because the work won't wait around for you to feel motivated. You respect the dirt under your feet, the animals that depend on you, the people who kept this place running for generations before you ever showed up. You don't complain about the heat when summer gets brutal. You don't make faces at the mud when the rains come through. You don't treat daily chores like some charming novelty you'll post about later. You fold yourself into the routine. You become part of the rhythm. You stop being a visitor and start being truly present. Or you don't belong. Simple as that. There's really no middle ground out there. Think about this for a second. Have you ever walked into a room and just known instantly that you didn't fit? Not because anyone was mean to you. Not because someone said something unwelcoming. The people were perfectly nice. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but something in your chest tightened anyway. You felt it in your bones. Those unspoken rules you didn't know existed until you were already breaking them. That's what people say she experienced from day one on that ranch. Now here's where this whole story gets complicated. From the outside, this relationship looked like magic, the kind of love story people write songs about. And actually, they did write songs about it. Multiple songs. The country boy with the easy smile and that gravel in his voice. The pop icon who dominated charts and reinvented herself more times than anyone could count. Two completely different worlds colliding in the most unexpected way. Fire meeting earth? Neon meeting starlight? The loud and the quiet somehow finding each other. The internet couldn't get enough of it. Every photo they posted together went viral instantly. Every interview where they mentioned each other sparked a dozen headlines. People wanted them to work because it felt like proof that opposites really could attract. He'd talk about her and his whole demeanor would shift. Softer? Lighter? You could literally see it in his eyes. This man was completely gone for her. And she'd talk about him like he was the calm she'd been searching for her whole life. The grounding force in the middle of all her chaos. The peace she didn't know she needed until she found it. It looked so real. Maybe it was real. But here's what nobody really wanted to acknowledge. Looking real and being sustainable are two very different things. You can have genuine love and still have fundamental problems that don't go away. Both things can be true at the same time. There's something that happened about a year into their relationship that insiders point to as the first visible crack. I'll get to that specific moment real soon. But first you need to see the pattern that was forming, because the pattern tells you everything. What people around the ranch started noticing was subtle at first. The visits were short, way shorter than you'd expect from someone supposedly building a life with a man whose entire identity was rooted in that soil. She'd arrive looking slightly uncomfortable, shoulders a little tight, smile looking a little practiced if you knew what to look for. She'd leave looking relieved. Looser. Like some weight had lifted the moment the car started pulling away from the property. The bags never fully unpacked. Not once in all those visits. Like she was always ready for a quick exit just in case. The excuses came easy and often. Work stuff in LA. Meetings in New York that couldn't wait. Studio sessions that got moved around last minute. Press obligations demanding her presence somewhere else entirely. None of it was made up. All of it was technically true. But it added up to something everyone around that ranch could feel in their gut. A pattern they'd seen before with other outsiders who never quite settled in no matter how long they stuck around. She was counting hours until she could leave. And when you're counting hours somewhere, people notice. They always notice. You can't really hide that kind of energy no matter how hard you try. Try to put yourself in his world for a second. Really imagine it. Sunrise bleeding orange and pink across fields that stretch further than you can see. Sound of cattle somewhere in the distance. Coffee steam rising in cold morning air. The crunch of gravel under boots that walked these same paths since childhood. Neighbors who don't just know your name but knew your grandfather's name too. Who remember the year the barn got built? Who show up without being asked when something needs fixing? Dinners where nobody checks their phone because nothing on any screen is more important than the people sitting at that table? Stillness that feels like sanctuary. Routine that feels like comfort. The same beautiful boredom day after day, and somehow it never gets old, for the people who belong there. Now imagine her world. Studio lights at 2 in the morning because inspiration doesn't follow any schedule. Fashion weeks across multiple continents. Album releases orchestrated like military operations. World tours where 1 million people scream your name and the energy hits so hard you feel it in your body for hours after. Constant motion. Constant creation. Constant reinvention, because standing still in that industry means getting left behind fast. Neither world is wrong. Neither one is lesser than the other. But they don't blend easy. And maybe they just don't blend at all. The question nobody wanted to ask out loud was pretty simple but kinda devastating when you really sit with it. What happens when the person you love can't love the place that made you who you are? People close to him started talking. Quietly. Never on camera. Never in ways that could get traced back to them. But the message stayed consistent every single time. She doesn't want his actual life. She wants the version of him that fits into hers. That sentence stings a little. Sit with it for a second. Because if that's true, and multiple people who were actually there suggest it was, then everything about this story shifts. You can love someone real deep and still be fundamentally incompatible with their actual day-to-day life. You can want forever together and still not be able to agree on where forever is supposed to happen. So, what exactly is this ranch test everyone keeps mentioning? It's pretty simple actually, and brutal, and basically impossible to fake no matter how talented you are. It's whether you stay after the photos are done and the content gets posted. It's whether you wake up before dawn without anyone having to ask you. It's whether you sit on that porch after dark when there's nothing glamorous about it and feel genuine peace instead of restlessness crawling under your skin. It's whether you look at that land and see your future there, or see something you're just enduring until you can finally get away. According to everyone who watched her during those visits, the answer was becoming clearer every single time she showed up. She wasn't failing because she lacked ability. This is one of the most accomplished people in entertainment we're talking about here. She survived and thrived through things that would have broken most people completely. She was opting out. Quietly. Consistently. Without ever saying it straight out loud. And there's a huge difference between failing a test and just choosing not to take it in the first place. The ranch sensed it. The community sensed it. His family sensed it too. The only real question left was whether he would let himself see it. But what came next wasn't dramatic. No big confrontation. No tabloid-ready scandal everyone could gossip about. It was quieter. Slower. Almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look for it. The gap between them started growing, and in part 2, I'm going to show you exactly how that gap turned into something they couldn't cross anymore. Plus, there's this one question about belonging that might explain not just this relationship, but maybe something going on in your own life too. Is belonging something you can actually learn over time? Or is it something you either have or you just don't? Stay with me, because the answer might change how you look at a lot of things. The hardest truth about belonging is that you can fake it for a while. You can smile on the porch when the cameras come out, post the sunset with some nice caption about peace. Wear the boots. Learn the phrases that make you sound like you get this whole world. For a season, it looks convincing. Even you might start believing your own performance. But here's what she was about to learn the hard way. Land has a way of exposing what's real. It's patient like that, doesn't argue with you, doesn't call you out directly, just waits. And watches. Eventually the truth surfaces whether you want it to or not. There was one specific weekend that insiders call the turning point. I'm gonna walk you through exactly what happened. But first, you need to understand why faking belonging never works in places like that ranch. Out on that Oklahoma property, there's no applause to chase. No audience to perform for. No metrics to analyze or charts to climb. Just long afternoons stretching into quiet evenings. Cicadas buzzing in the summer heat, wind rustling through grass, the distant sound of a truck on gravel that might just be passing through. If you're genuinely at peace inside, that silence feels like a gift. Like the world finally stopped demanding something from you for a minute. If you're restless inside, that same silence becomes a mirror. And mirrors have a way of showing you things you'd really rather not see. Sources close to him say this is exactly when the tension started showing up more clearly. Not in arguments, there were no dramatic confrontations for tabloids to report on. It showed in energy. In body language speaking way louder than words ever could. In how quickly bags got packed after every weekend visit, in how often the phone came out during quiet moments, in that subtle relief flickering across her face when it was finally time to leave. Little things. Barely noticeable unless you were paying close attention. But little things add up. They always do eventually. Now let me tell you about that weekend. It was supposed to be something special, a family gathering. Multiple generations coming together the way they did a few times each year. Traditions that had been repeated for decades. She was there, participating. Smiling, saying all the right things. But here's what someone who was actually present that day shared with me. And this detail has never gone public before. At one point during the gathering, someone asked her a real simple question. What's your favorite thing about being out here? That's it, normal question. Easy conversation starter. The kind of thing you answer without even thinking if you actually feel connected to a place. She paused, too long. Then she gave some generic answer about the beautiful sunsets. Not anger, not judgment exactly. Realization? It wasn't what she said. It was what she couldn't say. She didn't have a real answer because she didn't have a real connection. After all those visits, after all that time, she still couldn't name one specific thing she genuinely loved about being there. The sunset answer could have applied to any ranch in any state. It could have been anywhere on Earth with a decent view, and that's when people stopped wondering and started knowing for sure. You've experienced something like this before. I know you have. Maybe at a family dinner where you technically belonged but felt like a guest the whole time. Maybe at a job where you performed the role perfectly but never felt like part of the actual team. Maybe in a relationship where everything looked right on paper but something essential was just missing. That gap between I should feel at home here and I actually feel at home here. That's where resentment grows. Slowly. Silently. Until one day it's just too big to ignore anymore. Now think about what this whole thing was like from his perspective for a minute. You fall for someone electric. Someone whose energy lights up every single space she walks into. Someone whose talent and drive and passion made you feel things you hadn't expected to feel again. You love that fire, you admire it. You would never want to dim even a fraction of it. But you also love the quiet. You love those mornings when it's just coffee and cattle and the crunch of boots on gravel. You love the neighbors who've known your family for 3 generations now. You love knowing exactly where you'll be buried someday because this land isn't just property to you, it's inheritance, history, identity. It's who you are when the crowds disappear and the world stops applauding. Now you're standing between 2 worlds that don't blend easy. And the woman you love, she's not trying to pull you away deliberately. She's not being manipulative or malicious about any of it. She's just struggling to be present in the one place where you feel most like yourself. What exactly do you do with that? Insiders say he started noticing the pattern way more clearly as months passed. He'd want to stay longer at the ranch. She'd need to leave earlier. He'd bring up future plans for the property. She'd find ways to change the subject. He'd invite her to local community events. She'd already have conflicts that kept her somewhere else. No massive blow-ups. No scenes that would make headlines. Just quiet drifting. And drifting might honestly be the most dangerous thing that can happen to a relationship, because it happens so gradually you almost don't notice it happening. Until one day you look up and realize you're miles apart with no real memory of how you got there. The ranch community felt it first. These are observant people. They pay attention to things city people miss entirely. They notice how often someone actually shows up, how long they stay, whether they integrate into the rhythm of daily life or just hover at the edges like someone waiting for permission to leave. Hovering, that was the word that kept coming up when people talked about her. She hovered, polite, pleasant, physically present most of the time, but never really sinking in, never planting roots, never surrendering to that life's pace. Now here's what I want to be real clear about. That's not a character flaw. It's not something to criticize her for at all. It's a compatibility issue, plain and simple. Some people are built for stillness. That's where they recharge and feel whole. Some people are built for motion. That's their version of peace, the constant movement forward. Neither one is superior. Neither is more valid than the other. But when your partner's entire life is rooted in one specific place and you just can't root there with them, that matters. It matters way more than anyone wants to admit out loud. This is where opinions really split, and I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. Some people say she should have tried harder, should have pushed through the discomfort until it became comfortable eventually. That's what real commitment requires. You learn to love what your partner loves. Others say he was unrealistic from the very start. Expecting a global superstar to find lasting peace on a remote Oklahoma ranch was unfair to ask. He fell in love with who she was. He shouldn't have expected her to become someone completely different. Who do you think was right here? Was she wrong for not adapting? Was he wrong for expecting her to? Drop your take in the comments, because this question isn't really about two celebrities at the end of the day. It's about something all of us face at some point in our lives. Here's what this entire story is really asking underneath all the surface stuff. Can you truly love someone without loving the place their soul calls home? Can you build forever with a person whose definition of peace is the complete opposite of yours? We like to believe love conquers everything. Movies taught us that. Songs reinforced it over and over, but love doesn't erase fundamental differences. It doesn't rewrite what feels like home in your bones. It doesn't transform who you are at your core. Love tries. For a while. Sometimes a real long while, then reality settles in. Let's be fair to her for a second here. Her world wasn't shallow. The spotlight wasn't vanity or ego. It was creativity, expression, identity. The stage was where she felt most alive. The studio was where she processed everything she experienced. The constant motion was her version of peace. Asking her to abandon that wouldn't just be unfair. It would be asking her to stop being the exact person he fell in love with in the first place. The same way asking him to leave the ranch would be asking him to abandon his identity, his history, his roots. So where does that leave two people who genuinely love each other but can't agree on where home actually is? Stuck, drifting, trying to compromise on something that might not actually have a real compromise. Here's what stayed with me most about this entire story. The ranch didn't reject her. The ranch simply stayed what it always was. Unmoved by fame, unimpressed by accomplishments, unchanged by money or status or the noise of the outside world. The dirt kept being dirt. Sunrises kept arriving whether anyone woke up to see them or not. The routines kept repeating the same way they had for 3 generations. And in the face of all that permanence, one question became impossible to avoid anymore. Are you here to visit, or are you here to stay? Someone close to the situation put it in words I honestly haven't stopped thinking about since. The land doesn't care about your followers. It doesn't care about your awards or your sold-out tours. It only asks one question. Will you stay when nobody's watching? You can't fake that answer. Not out there. The land always knows somehow. So now I'm turning this whole thing back to you. Where do you actually belong? Not where you currently live. Not where your job requires you to be. Not where circumstances have temporarily placed you. Where does your soul exhale? Where do you feel like yourself without even trying? Is it a physical place? A person? A state of mind? And here's the harder question. Have you ever been in a relationship where you were expected to belong somewhere your heart never actually accepted? Did you try to force it? Did you perform belonging while secretly counting the hours until you could leave? Because this story isn't really about 2 celebrities who couldn't make it work. It's about all of us, the places we fit, the places we don't, and what happens when love asks us to bridge a gap that might actually be unbridgeable. Belonging isn't something you can manufacture with enough time or effort. You can learn new habits, adopt unfamiliar traditions, grow fond of places you didn't choose. But deep belonging, the kind that feels like exhaling, like finally coming home, like relief settling into your bones, that's instinctive. It either happens or it just doesn't. When people say she never passed the ranch test, what they really mean is pretty simple. She never exhaled there. She held her breath the entire time. And you cannot live that way forever. The ranch is still there today. Same dirt. Same sunrises, same creak of the screen door nobody ever bothers to fix. The routines continue. The code remains unchanged. And somewhere in Oklahoma, the land is still asking that quiet question to anyone who steps onto it. Are you visiting, or do you belong? The land doesn't need your answer. It already knows. If this video made you think about where you truly belonged, share it with someone who needs this perspective today. And tell me in the comments below, are you someone who visits or someone who belongs? I read every single response. Until next time.